Okay, so today we are going to learn about the midpoint formula, which is also another formula that you learned in algebra. The midpoint formula is up here for you. The midpoint, which is going to actually be an x and y pair, the way you find it is you do x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and you do y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Okay, so our midpoint is we're going to be able to find that by plugging into this equation. So let's look at our first example. If I'm given 2 points, what do I want to do to those 2 points? Label them. So I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to draw my parentheses. I'm going to draw a division bar with 2 in the denominator, another division bar with a 2 in the denominator, and close my parentheses. So on top of the first fraction, we're doing x1 plus x2. So 2 plus 6, what does that give me? 8. Then on the other one, it's 4 plus 8, which is 12. Okay? So that means my midpoint is going to be 8 divided by 2, which is 4, comma, 12 divided by 2 is 6. So the midpoint is 4, 6. Okay? All right, let's try another one of those. So number 2, I'm going to go ahead and label x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to draw my parentheses, my division bar with 2, comma, division bar, 2, close my parentheses. So on top of the first one, it's going to be 5 plus 7. What is 5 plus 7? 12. Okay, and then the second one's going to be 2 plus a negative 10. What is 2 plus a negative 10? Negative 8. Okay, so all I have left is to reduce those. So 12 divided by 2 is 6, and negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So that would be my midpoint of those 2 endpoints. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay, let's look at 3. So again, the very first thing that I would do, so I don't mess it up, is x1 plus an label x1 and y1 and x2 and y2. I'm going to plug into my formula, so I'm going to go ahead and write out what I know. I'm doing in the first numerator, it's x1 plus x2. So 4 plus a negative 6. What does that give me? Negative 2. And 5 plus 9 gives me 14. So that's going to give me negative 1, comma, 7 as my midpoint. Okay, let's look at 5. I just want to make sure we know how to do this. So if I was to label x1, y1, x2, and y2, in my first point, it would be negative 2 plus 5. What is a negative 2 plus 5? Negative 3 over 2, comma, and then we would do 3 plus a negative 3. What is that? 0 over 2. Okay? Negative 2 plus 5? Yeah, it would be a positive 3. Very good. Okay, so I would just leave this as 3 over 2. What is 0 divided by 2? 0. Okay, just want to make sure. Some of our other classes said 2. Okay? Any questions about just plugging into midpoint? No? Okay. Let's look at 10 and 11 then. So here they want us to find the midpoint of each segment. What are we going to have to do before we plug into the midpoint formula? You have to find your points. So A, from the origin, I would have to count left 2 and up 3. So that would be a negative 2, 3. And then for b, I would have to count to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, down 3. So that would be 4, negative 3. Now, if I plug into my formula, I'm going to get midpoint equals, we're doing x1 plus x2, so negative 2 plus 4 is 2 over 2, comma, and then we're doing 3 plus a negative 3. 0 over 2, and so my midpoint of this would be 1, comma, 0. Very good. Okay, let's try one more of those. So let's look at 11. On 11, before we could find the midpoint, we have to actually find the end points. So we're going to count off to get to C. So I'd have to go left 1, 2, 3, 4, and down 3. So it would be negative 4, negative 3. And then to find D, I'd go left 1, up 4. So that would be negative 1, 4. Now if I plugged in to find my midpoint, that would be negative 4 plus a negative 1. What is that going to give me? Negative 5 over 2, comma. Then we do negative 3 plus 4. 1 over 2. Do we need to change that? Nope, that would be our answer right there. Okay. Any questions from the graph ones? Okay, well then let's look at the back. So on the back, we change from finding the midpoint to being given the one endpoint and the midpoint, and we have to find the other endpoint. Okay? So remember, our midpoint is an x and y point. Okay? To find the x, I do the x1 endpoint plus the x2 endpoint, and I divide that by 2 to find x. And then to find y, I do the y1 endpoint plus the y2 endpoint divided by 2. Okay? So let's look at our problem. So we have a line. What is our line called? AB. So I'm going to label this line A, B. What is its midpoint? Well, right here it says M is the midpoint, so our midpoint would be M. Okay? It tells me that A has a coordinate of 2, 2. So this would be 2, 2. And M has a coordinate of 4, negative 3. Okay? And so that means this other endpoint would just be x comma y, because we don't really know what it is yet. So what is my x coordinate of my midpoint? 4. Okay? So remember, our x midpoint equals endpoint plus endpoint divided by 2. So our midpoint is 4, and that's going to equal our first endpoint, x2, plus our second endpoint, which is x. Okay? Let's go ahead and fill in our y. So what is our y midpoint? Negative 3. And that's going to be equal to our endpoint plus our other endpoint divided by 2. So this would be 2 plus y divided by 2. Okay, so we want to find x and y. We're trying to find the endpoints of B. So does anybody have an idea of how we may go about doing this? Okay, so here is how you would do that. We're just simply going to isolate x. So I'm trying to get this x all by itself. What would I do first to try to get x by itself? We can't subtract 2 because it's stuck in this fraction. Okay, we would have to get rid of this fraction. How do we get rid of fractions? Multiply by the denominator. So on this side I'm multiplying by 2. On this side I'm multiplying by 2. What is 2 times 4? 8 equals what happens with this 2 and this 2? They cancel, and I'm left with 2 plus x. Now how do I get x by itself? Subtract 2, and x equals 6. So we have 6 as our other x endpoint. Okay? Then are we going to do it any differently for our y? No, we're going to multiply both sides by a -2 because that's also the denominator over here. -3 times 2 is a -6. Our 2's here cancel, and I'm left with 2 plus y. So how do I get rid of this 2? Subtract 2, and y equals -8. So this would be -8. Okay? We're going to try another example of that just to make sure we got that process. So let's look at number 1. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is to draw my line so I can kind of see what's my midpoint, what's my endpoint. So I have line GO. Midpoint is E. It tells me that G has the coordinates of 2, 7, and E has the coordinates of 6, 1. And then we want to find this endpoint, so we're going to let it just be x, comma, y. Okay? So now, remember our formula is midpoint equals endpoint plus endpoint divided by 2. So I'm going to do my midpoint. What is my x midpoint? 6 equals endpoint plus endpoint. So 2 plus x over 2. Okay? I'm going to write my y as well. So I know that my midpoint, my y midpoint is 1. And that's going to equal endpoint plus endpoint divided by 2. So 7 plus y divided by 2. Okay? How do I solve for x on this side? Multiply by 2 on both sides. That's going to give me 12 equals 2 plus x. And then how do I get x by itself? Subtract by 2. So what does x equal? 10. Okay? Then we do the same exact thing for y. So to get y by itself, we first have to get y out of the fraction. So we multiply both sides by 2 because that's the denominator. So 2 times 1 is 2. These 2's cancel, and I'm left with 7 plus y. So how do I get y by itself? Subtract 7, and y equals -5. So how would I write that? Because remember, that's not my final answer. 10, comma, -5. Very good. So this would actually be my answer because I want to write it as a point. Okay, how do y'all feel about kind of doing it backwards to find the endpoint? How many of you are like, this is awesome, good, give me a thumbs up? Those of you who are like, not so much, let me see. Okay, so I'm going to show you another way that you could do this. For those of you who are like, I'm not sure about this. So let's look at number 2. So in number 2, I'm going to go ahead and draw my line. My line is HS. M is my midpoint. It tells me that H is negative 8, 3. It tells me, oh, I'm sorry. That's supposed to be C, isn't it? My C is negative 5, 5. Okay, so here's the more like logical way of doing this. Let's think of this as a number line, okay? I'm going to draw a number line for my X, and I'm going to draw a number line for my Y. So X, we started with negative 8, and we went to negative 5, so I'm going to start here with negative 8, negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, and 0. I think that's plenty. Okay, and then for Y, I started with 3, and I went to 5, so it's getting bigger. So I'm going to start with 3, go up 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I think that should be enough. Okay, so for my X's, I went from negative 8 to negative 5. So if I went from negative 8 to negative 5, I hopped 1, 2, 3 spaces. Okay? So if I started here and I hopped 3 spaces to get to the middle, how many spaces am I going to hop to get to the end? 3. Because if it's 3 from here to here, and this is the midpoint, because remember, isn't this equal to this? Then I'm going to hop 3 more. So if I started at 8 and I ended on 5 for the midpoint, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 more, and my X here would be negative 2. Okay? Now we're going to do the same thing for Y. I started with 3 and I went to 5. So if I start with 3, how many times do I have to hop to get to 5?
2.
1, 2. So how many times am I going to hop to get to the end point? 2. So what do we land on? 7. So my end point is negative 2, 7. For those of you who can think of it that way, kind of logically, this is much faster. For those of you who like plugging in, doing formulas, the other one's not that bad either. So I'm going to do another one this way because I know I just freaked you out showing you 2 different ways. So let's look at number 3. I'm going to go ahead and draw my line. It is HD. My midpoint is W. So it tells me that D is negative 6, negative 1. And it tells me W is negative 1, 1. Okay? And so that means we're actually finding H this time. Okay? So you always have to start from an endpoint, go to the midpoint, and then from the midpoint to the endpoint. So this time we're starting at this endpoint, going to W, and then we're going from W to this endpoint. Okay, so let's look at X's first. We started with negative 6 and went to negative 1. So if I was to draw my number line, how many times would I have to hop to get from negative 6 to negative 1?
5.
Okay, so we would hop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Let me finish the labeling. Okay, so then if we hopped 5 from negative 1, where would we land?
5.
Is that right? We went from -6 to -1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Then from -1, we still have to go 5, right? So 1, 2, 3. I missed 2, right? So we'd actually end up at 4. Okay? So our x would be 4. Now, let me give it to you this way. If we went right 5, didn't that mean that we just added 5 to -6? What is -6 plus 5? -1. What is a -1 plus 5? 4. So here we just added 5. So let's look at y and try to do it that way. So y, we went from -1 to 1. So if I start with -1, 1 is bigger than -1, right? So we're going up. Okay? So if I went from -1 to 1, how many did I go? 2. So basically I added 2. So if I added 2 to 1, what would that give me? 3. So you could continue out your number line, or you could just add 2 to that middle number. Okay? So our endpoint would be 4, 3. Okay. Do we want another example of that? Do you want another example of the formula?